Welcome everyone to our conference call with Velocity Investment Partners and Deloitte. John and I are happy to be welcoming our special guest, Ayesha Green, the National Sales Director and working with the AI Institute with Deloitte. Today we will be discussing valuable insights into current and emerging global AI trends, getting a deeper understanding of AI's informative and transformative role in the market and its future direction. We'll also be discussing strategies to leverage this knowledge to optimize our portfolios today, where she sees investment opportunities in the AI theme, some of the awareness of regulatory risks that are being presented, and some recommendations for everyone on what to watch, read, listen to. So we'll dive into it. I really just want to take this time to thank Ayesha for joining us and give you a little bit more background about her. She leads the team that kind of focuses on innovating and expanding the frontiers of artificial intelligence. She is in the front line. She works alongside industry leaders, researchers, and entrepreneurs to create and implement advanced AI solutions that can transform various industries. She also holds management and consulting roles in sectors such as healthcare, technology, and research. She has successfully helped early-stage entrepreneurs to bring medical devices, therapeutics, and information technology applications to the market. She holds an MBA from School of Business, York University. Ayesha is certified in both project management and Canadian healthcare executive, showcasing her ability to lead and execute projects successfully. With her unique combination of scientific knowledge, business acumen, and project management skills, Ayesha bridges the gap between research and commercialization. She is our guest expert today to talk everything AI. Welcome, Ayesha.
Thank you for that, Brianna, and thank you, John, and the Velocity Raymond James teams for inviting us here to talk about not only AI, but what's happening in terms of transforming how we engage and look at the world today. So for today's presentation, I'll walk you through a couple different pillars that will discuss not only how you educate yourself on the topic, but also get immersed in some of the tools and opportunities for investment across the market sector. We'll go into a little bit of foundational knowledge so that you do understand a little bit of the terminology, how it's used, and why people are so interested in this field today. We'll discuss some industry trends, and as Brianna has mentioned, we will also highlight some of the risks to consider as we step into this emerging world. But before we get started, let's think about the world that really rests before our eyes. What you're seeing here is not new, but it's something that is transforming the world that we see it today. Imagine this, typing in the movie that you would like to see. So for this one, imagine a lady who's entering a really busy street in downtown Tokyo. She's dressed to probably have a night out or have a fashion trip. All of this are text-related inputs that are put within a computer tool, what you've maybe heard as prompt engineering. Those simple text prompts can generate a full-length video in a matter of seconds. The quality, visual, resolution is absolutely similar to what we see in cinematic quality, all using generative AI. So this is the world in which we're moving into. Very scientific, maybe, but not so much. I want to walk you through how did we get here and why this has becoming the new reality that we're focusing on. The AI evolution is very rapid, and for some, it may seem like it's just come out of the box. But believe it or not, from since the 1980s to earlier now, we have been playing with a lot of these AI and generative AI tools. As most of you probably have a computer or a phone, you're already probably dabbling in the world of AI and may not realize it. The term was initially coined actually even before 1980, in 1950s, where universities started to play with what was called neural nets. And these are ways in which computers not only talk to each other, but also communicate how they can start to really interpret the world around us. So in terms of the 1980s to the 2000s, it was really about trying to find ways in which computers could automate and quickly mimic some of human behaviors. By 2010, we introduced the concept of machine learning. So this was having minimal amount of human intervention, but allowing the machines to not only learn the world around us, but start to interpret the information based on the data sets and information that was pulled from its database. Where we are now is where it is a lot of these tools generating new inputs, scaling opportunities for not only automation, software development, but access that everybody has their own ability to use, play, and actually build relationship with these tools. And it has skyrocketed. If we look at overall technical related interventions and adoptions, I'll give you the following examples. If we take the Model T, a lot of people drive nowadays. It took about 7 years for this technology to reach the hands of over about 1 million users. For AI platforms, online usage, about 2 years. For Facebook, believe it or not, 10 months. For the iPhone, which a lot of people have distinguished that as an iPhone moment of where technology, humans, intervention have really come to play, 74 days. For generative AI and AI technologies, the ones that a lot of people have been playing with, when it launched in November of 2022, it took 5 days to have over 1 million users on their platform. Pretty dramatic. But what caused that? The biggest change that we saw with all of these technology advancements that could not keep pace with ChatGPT was the accessibility of this tool. A lot of the platforms that are using generative AI are not being used by coders. They're by simple people who are interested in using technologies to create new dialogue, new creative outputs that you just saw earlier, or create images that don't require a lot of photoshopping. That's the power of generative AI and the accessibility that has really created the democratization of how these tools are being used. Though the excitement is real in terms of individual usage, a lot of spending has happened across the industry and enterprise scale. I've bucketed a couple pillars which I think everybody should be aware of which are changing market trends and adoption that is being supercharged specifically by generative AI. One, the experimentation of a lot of these technologies, which is creating what we could in term citizen developers. So these are everyday people who are just exploring the use and experimentation of the tools, but they may not be coders or developers. We are seeing a rise in terms of the digital workforce, people who are realizing the use of AI and AI related technology to quickly automate the workforce and provide numbers of efficiency as well as productivity gains. There are a few other areas where we are seeing a different shift in not only the uses of the tool, from not only having proprietary uses of the models themselves, but also different countries on restricting usage or also amplifying how they innovate at scale. It's projected that the market for the use of AI and generative AI will top over $3 trillion. And this is only by 2027. This number is actually projected to be even higher than the number presented here. As we are going forward in every year or every 2 year increments, we are seeing that there will be a further adoption, integration of a lot of the tools, interventions in the way we live, work, and also interact with each other. Global spending for most organizations will be at 100%. So you're seeing a direct correlation for how organizations are not only adopting and using these tools, but integrating it into the fabric of how they operate. But to integrate it into this fabric, we have to also be mindful of what's driving the adoption. So as highlighted in the previous slide, the reality is that there are only a few players within the compute layer. And this is what's attributing sort of that high cost of compute. We'll go over a little bit of what those foundation levels are and what to be aware of in terms of those layers of investment. So, a lot of organizations are contending with the high cost to build. They are thinking about cybersecurity implications of deploying tools, data on the internet, and what does it mean to have things in the public sphere when you're using these tools. As I've mentioned, workforce dynamics will certainly change as it applies to the use and adoption of these tools, but the overall democratization and the scaling of the use of these tools will be what pushes forward not only innovation, but also how we think about the guardrails, accessibility, and usage moving forward. but I don't want to get too far down into what the market holds without giving you a solid foundation of what really is AI, how it is explained in terms of the developers as well as the end users. So let's start there and take a little bit of a step back. So let's understand what really is AI. So AI, in a very broad term, is a way for machines to not only replicate human intelligence, but also make our lives a little bit easier. As I mentioned, that foray into machine learning is really what is distinguishing the levels of complexity that we're seeing with automation right now. And machine learning involves what we call a neural net. What is a neural net? So think about driving down the street. At every point that you're driving down the street, hopefully you'll see a stoplight. And those stoplights will give you an indication to turn right, left, or go straight ahead. Now imagine 10 or 20 of those stoplights, one after the other, each one indicating a branch or direction that you need to take. That essentially is what a neural network is. It is a branching of different realities or different directions that you need to take. Once you take one direction, it will indicate sort of a storyline of other directions that you need to take. Put all together, it creates a bit of a decision pool on understanding the world around it. So when individuals feed into it specific information, it is able to understand which direction it wants to take based on prompts humans give it or instructions that have been outlaid to it. That is essentially what machine learning is. Once you go a step deeper into deep learning, this is where neural networks really take an unstructured approach in being able to throw anything at it and interpret not only decision making, but also provide new instructions that come forward. Where generative AI plays within the space, it is part of a deep neural net. And this is where it is creating net new material. So it's not usually using sort of the traditional form of AI, which really does require it to give instructions on what it is seeing. Generative AI doesn't require that. It just requires it to give a pooling of information and it predicts the outcome. And so instead of describing to it initially on the onset that you're seeing a chair, a table, or a cup, you'll provide it with a list of different images. And from that pooling, it will predict that based on association, this is the closest replication that I can understand of what a chair, a cup, or a plate looks like. So that is, in essence, what AI is and how it works. Looking at the different layers that I've just mentioned before, let's take a little step deeper into understanding what that looks like. So the compute layer is really understanding all of the different elements it requires to process that information. And in order to process it, it needs what we've in term data. So if you think about a car and we go back to that car analogy, in order for the car to run, it needs oil. In this place, we do need data. Clean data will help in terms of the output, reliability, and some of the foundations that we're seeing. And what's plugged into when we use the compute layer and the data, it's the model that is processing all of those outputs to get you to the output of a text, an image, a video, etc. So at a very simplistic layer, that is how AI works and functions. But what are those key drivers that everybody's looking for? So, at a simplistic level, when we take the user input, taking those data, information points, putting it within a model, and getting those output, what people are really looking for is ways to actually change the dynamics on how they use these tools. So, if it is trying to get a paper that is quickly summarized and using maybe 200 word document into a few paragraphs, these types of tools will be able to do that. Creating net new content or creating new visual marketing plans is a way that other tools like generative AI can also help you augment those types of efficiencies. But the market specifically are looking for a couple different experience plays from not only efficiency, capability, and experience. So this might be automation of different processes, finding ways to obviously save costs and reduce overall resource count in terms of making sure that work is done, but done efficiently. It's not always cutting staff, but it's also finding out ways that you can optimize how they work better. It is finding capabilities for new insights to generate for how you want to enter into the market or new capability placed to improving your decision making. Or it may be also improving things like your creativity, knowledge retrieval, or differentiating organizations from other markets. I do want to pass it over to Brianna and John to maybe even touch on where they are also seeing other organizations or industries play within these specific pillars. Over to you.
Yeah, I think thanks, Aisha. Everything has been so informative. I'm even learning lots, which is great. We just wanted to touch a little bit too on some of the ways, as you mentioned, quite a few ways that businesses and companies are incorporating, AI into their business, and obviously we are as well. Through our marketing strategies, through our client servicing, making sure that predicting best actions and making sure we're responding in the most time efficient way. Also through our portfolio management, and maybe John, you can talk about a few of the ways we're using algos and predictive analysis on the portfolio management side.
Sure. And so yes, Brianne and I have created a couple of different algorithms, and as Aisha has explained, it's basically just deciding, red light, green light, what decisions to make based on where it is, and that's all the algorithm is. So it helps us monitor market conditions and give us a little bit of an advantage on determining whether or not we should get defensive, or if conditions are green light for higher equity weightings. The predictive analysis, we are just starting to get into that side of things, but we are going to use machine learning to help us predict which asset classes, sectors, and companies will have the highest probabilities of success. We're always looking for companies that are using it, and then knowing which companies are using it to their full advantage will help us identify leaders in their industries, and that in turn will help lead to potentially some of the best performing stocks, which we talk about. And then a lot of automation and just summarizing news, getting a large amount of data and getting the main points summarized very quickly, or the automation of trading, the automation of analysis, and just those automation areas are really helping us out right now as well.
Yeah, I think the automation in our analysis, on news is coming out constantly on stock specific, whether it's earnings release, whether it's fundamental, whether it's change of management, and to be able to automate all of that information that we get and really create processes and effective optimized tools to help speed up our efficiency from a management perspective, allows us to stay one step ahead of the competition and really dials in our portfolio management side that we do. So thank you. Aisha, we'll let you continue.
Actually, I do have one quick question, Aisha.
Sure.
How, and maybe you'll address this shortly, but how do you think society will prevent, or how do you think developers will prevent bad data or inaccurate data? Like if you just let the computer search the internet for answers and come back, how does it recognize what's actually good information versus inaccurate information?
It's a great question. And so I think in terms of throwing it into the model is always that misconception of I can just throw it into a tool and it can tell me what I need to understand. It does require a bit of pre-processing of that data. So you do have to indicate what the computer is actually seeing and understanding. So for most intensive purposes, and at this point in time, AI does not have moral agency or reasoning capability to the extent of a human. So a human will still need to understand what it is interpreting and also provide that intervention to a computer and let it understand how it is assessing the world around us. To understand that question that you've asked of what is the appropriate data that is being fed into it, the human still has to indicate what is the appropriate data. So if we look at sort of that layer model that I presented before, we take probably a three-step approach to it. So first, the data that you're looking at is what's the outcome that you're looking to achieve. So if it is market sensing or if it is related to specific competitor advantage, you will need to instruct the computer that this is what you're assessing and looking for. The second part of the data construct that you will need to look at is what public information sources that you want to actually tap into. So scraping the full internet may not give you the best decision that you need to be informative for the case that you are looking at. So you want to be very prescriptive in terms of what it is sensing from the overall market. And then sometimes it is also helpful, the last layer, and that third layer is to use specific proprietary data sets so that the information that you're getting back is trusted and secure. So those are sort of the three-level approaches to making sure that the data that you're coming back with or using within these tools are really informative.
Yeah, and I think that's for Raymond James specifically, we've talked to management about it, and they're going to have a closed system where the information is, just our intranet, just our information. It maintains the privacy, allows us to experiment with it a little bit more than anything that goes up to the public cloud and that. So.
Great to hear. And also considerations for protection of your own information, security, privacy concerns. It's also a direction that a lot of enterprises are taking, sort of that private institutional level database that they can query and find out information from.
Oh, thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'll move us forward in terms of where we're seeing industry disruptions. And this is not only sort of what the layers are presenting in terms of the infrastructure layer, but also where a lot of the investment is taking place. So let's start with the chip layer or that compute layer. So a lot of what's happening within the chip layer is really focused around one major company, NVIDIA. NVIDIA now controls over 80% of the market in terms of the development of chips. The other one that is close in line to NVIDIA would basically be AMD, which really houses the development of these chips. The reason why those two companies stand out is their longevity in terms of creating great processing units, but also the fact that since launching a lot of sort of the awareness around generative AI, in November of 2022, within less than 6 months, NVIDIA became a $1 trillion company. Now, NVIDIA stands at a larger GDP than Canada itself. Stock pricing for this company has traded over around $1,000, and this is one of the most hotly competitive as well as traded companies out there. But in lockstep, a lot of companies are now trying to enter this game. The cost for compute, however, is quite high. And that's why the players within this sector are quite small. Others that are now trying to compete within this space are Google, Intel to a small degree, as well as Microsoft. A lot of the platform technologies that you will see will encompass a lot of those tools, along with Amazon as well. The layer above that is where we see where these foundational models work. So not the chip, but actual model itself. You will see some of the players that we are seeing within the compute layer enter in this space. Specifically, the ones that people are talking about a lot is Microsoft, Amazon, as well as Google. There are a number of other platforms that are being that are entering within this space as well, but to not a large a degree as those specific entities. Where you will see a lot more activity, however, is in the industry solution layer. And this is where individual industries are looking to capitalize on specific needs or interest as applied to their industry. So that might be, and I will share in a couple other slides in the subsequent session, how different sectors such as consumer sector are using generative AI or AI capabilities to create new products, or healthcare sector to use that to compete with a lot of the different challenges that are contended within the healthcare sector. But corporations as a whole are all looking for ways and means to leverage these technologies and indicate how they can enter into this field. There's no one direct way in terms of organizations' entry into this market, but I can say that there has been a lot of interest as well as excitement on how we can leverage these tools. I'm also going to pause here and pass it over to Brianna and John to give a little bit of a coloring on what they're seeing in terms of the investment landscape as it applies to these different industries and solutions that are coming forward.
Yeah, I think We are a small owner of NVIDIA and some of these leading companies that are, as you mentioned, capturing kind of the value of AI across their realms and in these different layers. I think we are starting to see too, from an investment standpoint, a little bit of a shift too from hardware, not necessarily direct chips, but also to the software that is required for some of this, and really the users and service providers. From our perspective, and maybe John and I will just talk about some of the companies specifically that we've been investing in within the portfolio or areas. So for example, I know Aisha mentioned kind of the financial services. So JP Morgan, great reputable bank, the biggest bank in the world. They are training pretty much every new hire on AI. And they currently have the greatest volume of AI talent with nearly 6 times more AI staff than the average bank. So they're kind of expanding into almost all segments of the company, whether it's investment banking, corporate banking, retail banking, and just, figuring out ways that they can incorporate and use this machine learning to, personalize digital experience from their research platform to payment validation systems to gain efficiencies and improve kind of their fraud detection. So that's definitely one area that we have. And even thinking of a consumer experience, right, is whether it's pricing or purchasing needs or modeling or forecasting, we do see AI emerging as really a game changer in kind of the finance realm there. John, you want to talk about that?
And one that I always find really fascinating, because it's not one that you would typically think of, but Union Pacific, it's a railway company. They're using AI to predict equipment failures before they occur, which is helping reduce downtime and maintenance costs. They're using sensors and that to proactively address any issues that come up. And they're also using AI to improve their scheduling, routing, and fuel consumption, which is helping reduce costs and make them more profitable. So we are, you'll recognize quite a few names on this list as companies that we own, but we're constantly looking for companies that are leveraging it to improve their efficiencies and operational productivity.
Yeah, and I think one of our favorites we are very much invested into it is healthcare, right? I think that's become so front and center too after COVID. And just how AI is, whether it's with diagnostics and treatment planning, thinking about like areas like cancer, predictive analytics, to help intervene earlier progression or diagnosis in diseases. AI virtual assistants now you're seeing a lot when booking online. That is going to help improve, patient access. We already have a limited amount of doctors within Canada, so being able to, expand that reach as well, and helping labor-constrained healthcare systems in triages, and really kind of patients improving surgical outcomes through more precise robotic surgery. So a company that we have been really is Eli Lilly and AbbVie. Both have been leaders in this area, and are companies that we invest in too. They've done a lot of improving the design and conduct of clinical trials, and also, as I mentioned earlier, the diagnostic and treatment accuracy. Also, Abbott Labs has been great in kind of the heart attack prediction and real-time medical imaging during surgeries. And then finally, Merck, another one. AI is kind of employed for their drug discovery. So again, leading healthcare companies that we own in the portfolio that are using and incorporating AI into their business model.
Thank you for that, Brianna. So over the next 6 months, we are and have already seen quite a few things emerging across the sectors. I have highlighted a few items that I will be going through in a bit more detail in subsequent slides, just to give you an overview of the impact that we're seeing in terms of change, but the disruption is going to be large. So across data and infrastructure of what Brianna had already mentioned, IoT, quite largely, information and technology, there are so many changes that a lot of organizations are beginning to incorporate for not only efficiency gain, but also profitability. And what we're seeing now is going to dictate what we're going to see in the next couple years that will really dramatically change how organizations really play and use these tools. So let's start with healthcare. Because after COVID, there have been so many different changes in terms of how we invest, but also interact as patients and citizens within our healthcare system. Globally, healthcare spending has reached over $9 trillion per year, close to 11% of our global GDP. And that continues to rise across each of the different countries around the world. Globally, it has been indicated that not only AI can not only help contend with some of the challenges that we have in terms of patient experience, staffing, administrative burden, but also system integration as a whole. 68% of physicians globally are excited by the role of AI. Likewise, patients also see this as a way to provide better, accurate care. So, what does this mean in terms of solutions that we're also seeing that are moving forward? So, I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson for myself. Before making the shift to AI IoT, I was actually a biochemist, and doing any sort of research that required drug development took years. So, for my thesis, it took me a long time, over 5 years, just to get to one model of a protein. And if you can imagine a protein as being an image or a structure that changes in shape and time, very difficult to model and very difficult to understand the structure and how it will interact when you put it within a human setting when you have a drug profile. Typical cost for drug delivery and drug discovery will be 10 to 20 years. And that doesn't encompass all of the failures that sometimes happen with drugs as well. The cost to create one single drug can be billions of dollars. And this is also impacting rare disease. Now imagine cutting that in more than half. We've already created with NVIDIA a number of different prototypes for new drugs discovery that have already been patented. Cost for delivery and development 100,000 and less. Development time less than 1 to 2 years, and now we're already going into the testing cycle for not a lot of these drugs. This is the reality that we're shifting into, meeting the needs of the patients when they need it, improving health outcomes and decreasing costs. These are investment opportunities that a lot of organizations are now pivoting towards, realizing that we have a lot of data that we're already sitting on in terms of health profile, but we also have a lot of organizations that are heavily invested in this area, from Merck, Sanofi Pasteur, to others that have already been indicated earlier in terms of investment profile. These are where organizations are certainly putting their big bets for now and into the future. Another industry that I want to take a little bit of a snapshot on is consumer sector. So consumer sector valuation is over about $4.2 billion in terms of efficiency, cost savings, as realized in terms of profitability gains, could be seen from AI, generative AI augmentation of the way they work. Specifically, even as an advent of COVID, supply chain was heavily impacted as a result of just changing needs during the pandemic. AI has been used to not only complement how you identify changes within the dramatic inputs or outputs of supply chains, but also where you can find efficiency gains in terms of marketability, end-to-end consumer engagement, and also finding investment opportunities for companies who are specifically focused on those areas. But where I'd like to also shift us to is product design. A lot of organizations and high-end developers from Louis Vuitton, Balenciaga are using these types of tools to create new images of what fashion could look like. Product design is also being used in terms of manufacturing as well to hyper personalized experiences, identify the research opportunities, but also make new trends in terms of forecasting potential needs that may come forward within the market. The potentials are endless in terms of how products are being developed, but also designed to meet the needs of the market and changing customer demands. But with all of this, it's also being mindful of some of the risks that are out there. Though a lot of organizations and individuals are using these tools off the shelf, we do encourage a more responsible way in terms of not only how to operate with these tools, but also being mindful of how or what the risks are and how to effectively mitigate them. So these tools, though impressive in their output, sometimes not only produce a bit of an accuracy, but it's also hard sometimes to explain how they work. And this is attaching conversations around the reasoning ability of some of these tools. So you may have heard the comment of hallucinations. This is in part by some of the challenges of predicting and not having a definitive outcome. And so those are some of the challenges that are inherent with some of these types of tools. Bias and IP violations are also concerns. So, for applications and models that are scraping the entire internet, sometimes the data that is ingested is not protected by the entity that is that is the user. So, you do need to be mindful in public instances of tools and models where the information is being stored, how it's being used, and who is the author or owner of that information. So there are a number of litigations that are coming forward in terms of IP violations. So being mindful of just having an auditing tool, and also the types of violations that may change within every different jurisdiction or country is one to be mindful of. Having a robust privacy and security layer in hand is also helpful in terms of mitigating some of the challenges and risks that come forward. The regulatory landscape for all of the different countries will be changing to align to some of the risks that are coming forward. But some of the mitigation steps that we have identified, which a lot of organization companies as well as countries are implementing, is either having restricted usage of some of the tools, having an appropriate audit trail, and also making sure that there is correct oversight in terms of the ethical as well as obligations for IP violations that are being constructed by these tools. The one thing that we always encourage is to have humans in the loop. As I've mentioned before, these tools do not have a reasoning ability outside of what humans program it to do. So it is important to ensure that there is appropriate oversight and also humans intervening in terms of understanding what is the target end goal of the solutions that we want to develop and how we can use it for the betterment, not only for ourselves and our community, but also the investment decisions that we want to use moving forward. So, with that, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about what's coming forward within this space, opening up for conversations, but also want to pause here to see if there are any final thoughts from John as well as Brianna to see if they want to share, in terms of other considerations for this space.
Yeah, and you brought up so many good points, and Brianne and I, we've even caught AI, especially on the advice front. I find it's really good at helping process information very, very quickly. It can do things about 10 million times faster than a human can. But in terms of the actual, when I ask it to help with advice, just testing it out, I find that it's been wrong for me at least 75% of the time. So it's not quite at that level yet. Who knows what the future will bring? But what do you think about where will the average person, and in terms of AI at home, where do you think the general public will start to use it the most in our daily lives?
Great question. So it's sad to hear that a lot of the advice that you got back was not completely accurate. I think with a lot of the models right now, it does require training. So that is just the interaction with humans, just making sure that the output is as close as possible to the outcome that you're looking for. And it also depends on the advice that you're looking for. So sometimes people have put in very comical things of tell me a joke on a typical on a topic, or provide me advice on the boyfriend that I'm seeing, and if I should maybe switch that up. So it's sometimes humorous, but also sometimes that is where we're seeing sort of the average person just interact with the tool based on sort of their own life situations. But for a more practical application, we are seeing people use it to help me summarize a large document that I need to review into one paragraph, or help me or help guide my creative process on a couple different images that I want to create for a marketing campaign. So some of the outputs that we're seeing are quite realistic and also in terms of the output, quite valid in terms of how they can be using it. So I wouldn't say that you use all of these tools carte blanche. You do require a bit of a review, pass at it to see if it is really hitting the mark before you kind of use it for wild scale usage. But for the average user, I think most of them are just jumping in and playing with the tool, from either creating new music to creating new images to also using it to provide advice on how do you structure a business plan if I'm looking to start a new business as well. So some of those are sort of the basic sort of individual usage that we're seeing with some of these tools and applications.
I know you talked about too, Aisha, some of the risks, and John and I have seen firsthand some of these deep fakes, they call them,
Mhm.
in AI are becoming, very realistic now. There was one, it showed, an explosion in the stock market, dropped quickly on news that they thought something had happened with the Pentagon, but it ended up being, fake news that someone had created this post. So and a lot of them again are very realistic. So I guess the question is, from reality and truth, with the US election coming up, do we see, or is there any way that some of these things can be a little bit more controlled, or how do you see kind of society handling this misinformation and some of these fakes out there?
It's a great question. And I think that's where we're sort of bridging the gap of what's real and what's fake, and actually putting a premium on the information that that holds with it. So I have noticed that there are a couple news agencies, one particular Guardian as well as Reuters, they are actually putting a bit of an indicator that this has been verified as not fake news. So this is one step on where there is that premium to ensure that information coming forward is truthful and it can be accountable for the information that we want to hold and make decisions around. But you're absolutely right. Deep fakes are becoming challenging because they are looking so realistic. If I have time, I'll probably run a bit of a little bit of a challenge for your audience to actually spot the deep fake. And it is three different images that I'll probably present if I've got time and I can add it to the deck so that you can actually challenge yourself on what is real. And the challenge is it's harder and harder to discern. There are a number of tools that are entering in more on the software application layer to identify these deep fakes. And this is an investment opportunity that a lot of organizations are now pivoting towards. So there will be deep fakes that can detect your audio, visual, as well as different other creations of text images, or sorry, text that has been created to identify it. So it will be just a drag and drop application that you put it in a platform and quickly identify if it has been modified. So a number of those tools are now entering into the market. And so there are ways to mitigate that are kind of helping people discern what is real and what is fake. But know that the market is changing so dramatically that all of these tools do require a bit of a human lift to constantly update and review these tools to make sure that they're the most accurate and reflective of the world that that we're entering. And because the news cycle changes so quickly now, and particularly in an election year, I think there will be a higher emphasis on that certification branding of what is real information and what has been tampered with.
And speaking of tools, I think a lot of confusion. There's so many different tools and names out there. We've got ChatGPT, the original, and then now you got Copilot and Bing, all from Microsoft.
Yeah.
Google's got Gemini and Bard. Like they all have multiple names, and I think a lot of people are confused as to what does what and how they're going to use it. I know Amazon's upgrading Alexis to incorporate AI now, so they'll have those, your Google Home and your Alexis home that use it. But I think a lot of people are just confused on how they're going to use it for the average.
Moving forward. Understood. So why don't I bring this one back? Because this one will help ground on what are all of those names coming forward? Why do they keep changing? And how am I actually using it? For more of the individual user, you're probably at this output layer. So this is where you're going to see the DALI, the Microsoft Copilots, those applications that are now going to be within your computer. And I know recently Microsoft just announced the new PC that will integrate sort of your Copilot and other AI. Most of of that you'll see at this output layer. And so that will change based on sort of how people typically want to use these tools. Where you're seeing the other things of like the Llama, the Claude, the other open AI systems that keep changing is this foundational layer. So for in the individual user, you're probably not going to use that very much unless you have a specific usage that you're trying to get to. So some models perform better than others. And so if you're looking for something that does more text or images, you may refine your search to specific search engines, like, for example, the Copilots or the Llama, if you are looking for something that's text related. If you're looking for models that are specifically trained on images, that might be sort of your DALL-E, your Midjourney, etc. So that's where you're seeing sort of the distinction between some of the names that are coming forward. The ones that you will see probably a little bit less or more, depending on the news cycles that you're reading, is sort of that compute layer. And so those are the actual graphic processing chips that create all of the uh, ability to do those mathematical calculations and predictions so that these foundational models can actually work. And all of them, and if we're looking sort of geographic and regionally, are all produced in Taiwan. So when we see a lot of the geopolitical shifts and changes that are coming forward, particularly within that region, it is because there is a bit of an arms race as it applies to these types of tools and technology and how they're developed. NVIDIA does have a bit of a step up in terms of creating very small, very fast producing chips that can function and support the foundational models that are being created. So hopefully that gives you a bit of sense of what you're seeing in terms of those different names and where you actually interact with some of these tools.
Thank you.
And I know we had talked before too, some, for clients or people who are looking to learn a little bit more about, what to watch, read, listen to. I know we did talk about the Sam Harris podcast as a great way. I believe it's called Making Sense. The AI podcast by NVIDIA, and In Machines We Trust podcasts. John and I like to listen to a lot of podcasts, so podcasts are kind of our go-to way there. I know there's some, probably Microsoft offers a free AI course for beginners if you are looking to do a little bit more there. We've read a few Forbes articles too. We're happy to share any additional material if anyone is interested. And I know there's also a great TED Talk on AI that we found on YouTube that we're happy to share that link as well. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just about to just add on to that comment of just educating, upskilling in this area. There's a lot of content to kind of go through and just familiarize yourself with not only terms, technology, and also just the conversations that are coming forward. Take baby steps in. I know it is a bit challenging to figure out where to wade in, but hopefully this will give you some basic steps of just a couple words. Podcasts are a simple way to just digest the information, and happy to have another conversation if you ever have any questions about some of what you're seeing coming forward within the market as well.
Perfect. Well, again, John and I, and on behalf of Velocity Investment Partners, we appreciate your time. Ayesha, thank you so much for joining us again, and all of our clients and prospective clients who are on this Zoom. And again, Ayesha is the Senior Manager of the AI Institute of Canada with Deloitte. And we were very fortunate to have her be our featured guest for the day. So thank you again.
Yes, thank you,
you.
Ayesha.
Thank you.
Perfect.